We're the Cola Guys. I'm George.
And I'm David.
Today we're joined with our good friend Brian Hubbard. He's with SCInspecitonPros and he's a home inspector.
Yep.
Nice to meet y'all.
Welcome to the show. It's not like we don't know who you are.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, we've known Brian for a couple of years now, right?
I'd say about, yeah.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of our home inspections for us. We, love the job that you do, but a lot of people don't know what home inspectors do, and there's a lot of confusion about that. So thank you for joining us today to talk about all of this and demystify some of this.
I said before this, if I give you a thumbs up, that means I think your idea is crap. I'm nodding my head with a thumbs up.
Our good friend Ruby this morning. So good morning, Ruby.
Good morning.
How does that work? Does that look good to you? Yeah? We should have just kept going.
So why don't we start? Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what brought you to this community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you for that. So yeah, like you said, I'm Brian with Inspection Pros. Right now it's just me. Moved to this area, I'd say about 3 years ago, really be closer to family, start the business here, and been doing this pretty much since we got here, so about 3 years in inspections now.
Awesome.
So are you just doing residential inspections or?
Yeah, so right now I think eventually we'll branch into commercial, but right now just focusing on residential. The market's just still so hot in that, so there's really been no reason to try and branch out, do something different, because it stay busy enough doing just residential.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So why Columbia? What was here that kind of drew y'all to this spot?
We get asked that a lot. We moved here from Nashville, Tennessee, and I obviously love Nashville, Tennessee, bigger town, bigger city, but
yeah.
There's a lot happening here. There's a lot of growth here, a lot of potential, and a great time to be in business here. And really, it was kind of the center point of where our family was at. So we had family in Charleston and Charlotte, Raleigh, and then out towards Clemson. So it was kind of that middle point of close to everybody, but
still had your space.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Far enough where
everybody's
they
moved
go
here now, but it's growing. It's great, and I mean, I personally love it here. So
That is a nice area to go to. I mean, Columbia is just, it's big enough to have enough to do. And there's with the university here, the SEC sports, you got that going on too. And then you got Lake Murray that just adds a whole other layer to it. So we're blessed in a lot of ways. But so as a home inspector, what do you do when George or I call you, we got a customer that's buying a house and we say, hey, Brian, we need you to come look at it?
yeah. So in terms of the process before, the process during.
Both.
So yeah, obviously we'll figure out when we can fit it in on the schedule. In Columbia, they don't provide MLS access to anybody but appraisers and realtors, obviously, as you guys know. So you have to come and babysit us. So we figure out a time that works on everybody's schedule, the seller's schedule, that we can get in. And then once we get out there, it's really kind of a general process of determining the condition of the home and giving the buyer an understanding of what they're potentially going to be purchasing. So that's everything from the foundation up to the roof, the crawl space, any issues down there, things like foundation, settlement issues, moisture issues. Then getting into the house, you have all the mechanical systems, so the HVAC system, electrical and plumbing, making sure there's no active leaks, electrical problems, fire hazards, making sure the HVAC system's running good, and then all the little things throughout. So your sinks, your toilets, your showers, your cabinets, doors, windows, and then up in the attic, same thing, making sure there's no structural issues up there, no leaks from the roof, and then up on the roof, making sure there's no missing shingles, broken shingles, damaged shingles, hail damage, things like that, so you really know what you're getting into, what you're purchasing before you go ahead and do it.
Nice.
Some buyers and even sellers, they hire the home inspector to get their inspection done, but then they also think that the inspector is the one to do the repairs. Are home inspectors allowed to do repairs, and do you do any repairs?
No, I wish. I'd be driving a lot nicer car if I could do that. So there's basically a rule, or I guess you could call it a law, that we're not allowed to do work on a house we inspect for 12 months afterwards, particularly things that were on that inspection report. So if I wanted to own a landscaping business, and I could go and take care of landscaping, things like that. But the conflict of interest is if we say there's an issue with the plumbing, there's an active leak, and then we go and fix it, what they protect or what they try to protect from is we could go underneath the house, nobody else is following us under there. So say there's all these issues, charge all this for repairs, and there's really nothing going on. So it's kind of to protect really everybody involved. So so you have a little bit of checks and balances system of somebody else is going in there, somebody else is doing the repairs, and we're an unbiased perspective. And that's why a lot of times people will have somebody else, and I won't call out any specific trades, but somebody else come out afterwards and say you need a brand new roof, or your whole plumbing system needs to be replaced, or your electrical is going to burn down your house. Well, they come out and ultimately their business is selling those services, whereas the only service that I sell is just the home inspection. You pay your fee, you learn about the home, and I have nothing else to gain from that. I have nothing else to sell after that home inspection, so it's a completely unbiased perspective of what you're purchasing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and so a lot of people don't understand that, right? They don't understand that you're there to give them an opinion, not to follow up and correct everything. But there's still some people wonder well, how did you become a home inspector? So what's involved in being licensed in the state of South Carolina to do what you do that separates you from other folks?
Yeah, so it's a relatively I guess I don't love this part, but it's a relatively easy course to go through. I think it's about 80 hours. You can do it all online. And there's a licensing exam that has a business portion and then a technical portion, which does weed out a lot of people. But there's some in this industry, and as with every industry, that you have people that maybe necessarily shouldn't be in it and doing it. And it can be a little bit too easy to get into, but really what it is, you go through the course and you learn all the technical aspects of what you're supposed to be looking for, what's required within the scope of a home inspection. And then training on that, and what got me into this in the first place was we lived in a couple houses that were not necessarily flip homes, but did renovations. So I did all our own plumbing, did a lot of electrical work, did some roofing work, did a little bit of construction, and then just regular renovations. So learned a little bit about all of it and just kind of self-taught. I like doing that, and kind of wanted to find an industry that I could get into that lended well to that. And that's why I got into home inspections. And what kind of sets a good home inspector apart from one maybe not so great is all the continuing education, being involved in the associations, and going out there and learning things, because they build houses a lot different now than they did 50 years ago. So you're looking at completely different things, and new things are happening every month of just regulations of what they're doing with electrical, what they're doing with plumbing. So it's staying up to date and making sure that what's being built, especially on newer construction now, is being built as it should and properly.
Okay. So let's back up and think about that a little bit, because like you said, there's a lot of new home construction here in the Columbia area. So if George and I have a client that's purchasing a new home from a builder, what is the process, the optimal process of engaging you from the time they sign that contract to the time that they get the keys and close on the house and move in?
Yep. Great question. So right now I only offer just the final walkthrough and inspection. So that's basically a general home inspection, probably about a week out from closing. That's everything we talked about before. A lot of people ask about pre-drywall inspections, and if you asked me a year ago, I would say it's not really necessary. You have so many people coming through from the town and checking for permits that anything that's wrong should be caught. But now that they're throwing up so many houses so quickly, and it's hard to find good subs, and they're spending so much on materials, they're finding areas to cut corners, maybe make things a little bit cheaper. So I'm starting to lean more towards, I think that a pre-drywall inspection is important. But then that kind of begs the question of who's qualified to do that. And home inspectors are, but not from their regular training. So what you should be looking for in a pre-drywall inspection is going to be a lot more code related. And there's a misconception about what we do that we're code inspectors, and that's not the case at all. What we're looking for is function and safety defects, and the book of what you're looking for and learn from as a home inspector versus a code inspector are entirely different things. There's overlap, but it's a lot more based on spacing and clearances of things. And most home inspectors will charge for a pre-drywall inspection, and really what they're walking through and looking for, and the only thing they're qualified to look for is the broken studs, things that if you're walking through the house, if you're in the area, you can see very easily and not have to pay somebody for. So I always recommend to people when they call me and they're looking for a pre-drywall inspection is find somebody that has a true construction or builder background, or has a code inspection background, or is focused in taking courses in that, to make sure that what you're paying for is actually what you're getting.
Talking about qualifications as a home inspector, when you're looking at like the different HVAC systems and plumbing and everything, when you see a problem, how deep is your not necessarily your investigation, but looking into it, how deep are you allowed to tell about it, and when do you suggest they get a person from that industry to go out to the home and take a deeper look?
Yep. So it's important to note that we are we are generalists. So I will never say that I know more about plumbing than a plumber or more about electrical than an electrician, but I know enough to state what the issues are if there is an issue. But then it goes back to we can't do the work. So a lot of times people ask, well, what's that going to cost to fix? Well, I could tell you what it would cost if I was going to fix it for you, but I'm not the one fixing it. So you have to call, if it's something that I definitely recommend you need repaired or something that needs to be fixed, that's when a good time is to call out a plumber, an electrician. So if you want to know how much it's going to cost to fix this leak or cost to fix this electrical that's a safety hazard, you need somebody that can actually do that work to come out and tell you what it's going to cost. So a lot of times if there's something that needs to be repaired, and that's when you'll call in a plumber, an electrician, a roofer. And then on the flip side, there's sometimes things that just are wildly unorthodox that just are not within the realm of what we see all the time. So a lot of times if you have larger houses or something that maybe it was a commercial building converted to residential, you have systems that are a little bit unique. Happens a lot with HVAC systems is it's set up to run in a different way and not normally what you see in residential construction. So sometimes in that case we'll recommend just having a specialist come out or maybe things like boilers where I've never seen a boiler here in my 3 years, but I know once you get outside of Lexington and Richland County a little bit, you're going to see more oil burning furnaces, things like that they just don't have around here. So that's too, and I'd recommend a specialist just to have somebody come in and take a look at a system that maybe is a little bit different.
So an established house. If I'm looking for like an older home, like in one of the older neighborhoods downtown Columbia that's maybe 100, 120 years old, are you comfortable going and looking at an older home like that, or is there a point like in how old the house is where you might defer to somebody who's got more knowledge of like historical type or older home renovation type stuff?
Yeah, so I'm definitely comfortable with an older home like that. Where the difference is going to be is it's going to be an older foundation. A lot of times it's just stacked stone, things like that. And it works. It's held the house up for 120 years, but you're going to see issues from underneath, and there's going to be repairs that have been made. There's going to be things that aren't obviously to current standards. But it's funny you bring that up because I always kind of laugh when people are like, oh, I want to buy a 100-year home because they don't build them like they used to, and the bones are good and all those things. And if you're looking for something that's going to be great for your family for 30 years and not create issues, that 100-year-old home is not going to be better for you than that brand new home. And yes, one of the big things is the wood. The wood's not so hard in studs, but it's still a brand new home, and they're building them and they're lasting plenty of time. Whereas in this 100-year-old home, you're going to have constant repairs you're going to have to make. You're going to have things that are breaking. You have older systems, older pipes, older electrical, and you're going to have issues with those consistently, and it's going to cost you a lot more money in the long run to upkeep that 120-year-old home than it is to upkeep a brand new or 5-year-old home.
Gotcha.
So talking about older homes, when a buyer goes in and they put an offer on an older home and it gets accepted, what are some of the common things you see just outside of the pipes and stuff like that really should be a concern for the buyer to not necessarily run from the house, but look in a different direction, just outside of the usual.
On an older home?
Yeah.
A lot of what it's going to be is things like energy efficient stuff. So there's not going to be nearly as much insulation up in the attic, unless there's been renovations, but most of the time there won't be nearly as much insulation up in the attic. They're not going to have flooring insulation underneath in the crawl space. They're not going to have vapor barriers. So a lot of times you have moisture issues underneath. Not as much insulation in the walls. You don't have double pane windows. So things like that, it's going to cost you a lot more to heat and cool that house. With piping, there's things, they don't use it anymore, but polybutylene piping is a big one, and that not so much 100 years ago, but probably about 30 years ago they were putting it in homes. And a lot of times an insurance company won't cover a leak from polybutylene piping, so you get in this house, you say, that's not something I want to fix, there's no active leaks. Well, all of a sudden you have a leak in your wall, you have a big flood. You call your insurance company and they go back to the report, and you were aware there was polybutylene piping, you never made them aware, and all of a sudden they're not going to cover that issue. So you're stuck with a flooded out first level in your house. So and I'm sure 30 years from now they're going to look at some of the materials we use, and there's going to be problems just because it's a newer material that hasn't been tested and put to the test of time. But just over time, a lot of cast iron drain pipes, galvanized water lines, they corrode over time. with these galvanized water lines, a lot of times you'll see once you turn on a faucet, you're going to get brown water for the first 3 or 4 seconds. That's because the water's sitting in this pipe that, I mean, for example, when we were in Nashville, that's what we had. So I cut out about a 6-inch section underneath our kitchen and held it up to the light, and you could not see through it because that's how much corrosion and rust was built up in there. But it ran pretty well. The pressure was fine, that you'd never really notice there's a problem. But that's what you get with older materials that have corroded and been worn over time.
So when you go into a scenario where somebody's bought a house, renovated it, and selling it to flip it, right? Mm-hmm. Are those the types of things that you're kind of looking for? Is like how deep did they go to in updating the mechanicals of a home to kind of make that home, that home buyer comfortable with purchasing it?
Yep, and so a lot of people are going to say, well, why do I need to spend $350 on inspection? I just walked through this house and it's brand new. They just flipped it, they renovated it, and it looks perfect.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'll look at those and I look at some of the trim and baseboards and stuff, which aren't included in the inspection, but I'm like, well, it's not perfect, but it looks nice. I'm sure it's newer tile, it's newer cabinets, things like that. But where they neglect it a lot of times is because it's just been one of those businesses where people are like, oh, I can make a ton of money doing this and make it quick. And the big costs are going to be a lot of those mechanicals, so a full plumbing replacement, a full electrical replacement, ductwork underneath. And those often get neglected because they don't want to spend the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to replace that whole system when it's hidden. Yeah. And most of the time the buyer's not going to see it, the buyer's not going to know about it. So they fix the outside, they fix the inside, they put a new roof on it, and it looks, for all intents and purposes, a brand new house. And I wish we could show photos. I know the ones I show in the first time home buyer workshop a lot are from underneath flip homes where they neglect a lot of times. Yeah. And I just was in one just last week, and the people were meticulous. They've taken such great care of this house. They had the binder of all the repairs, all the fixes they've done. And I get underneath and I'm going in the crawl space and pretty much nothing alarming with this house yet.
Yeah.
And then get underneath, and when a piece of ductwork was going up into the floor underneath the kitchen, there was a whole bunch of moisture and mold and rot. And they put in new cabinets in the kitchen and never put a toe plate for that register to push the air out. So this air was basically collecting in a 2-inch tall space underneath the cabinet, and excuse me, you're pumping this really cold air that's now meeting with the hot floor from underneath in the crawl space. It creates humidity, and that's where all that moisture is coming from. And then I get underneath their bathroom that was just renovated in 2021, so just last year, about probably 8 or 9 months ago. Bathroom looks fantastic. They did a great job with it. And as I'm looking around, I see just a lot of moisture staining and a lot of really wet wood again. And they had some old pipes from where they used to have the sink, and they just put some duct tape over it, and they just ran a new pipe. But it's still connected to the sewer system. And then I just see a pipe that's just going to nothing. And I call the realtor who was up in the house, and I said, hey, can you turn on the shower real quick? She turns on the shower, and sure enough, all this water just comes draining right out of that pipe into the crawl space, splashing all over the wood. And I've seen that multiple times, and it's just things that you can't find. And that's why, I mean, I kind of rambled on for a long time there, but that's why you hire a home inspector for those things you can't see.
I guess my comment on that scenario is, the old saying is you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig, right? So I guess in those, particularly when we get clients going into those homes, we'd love to have you come in and look at them, because like you said, people will present in one way like, oh, we've done all these things and this house is great. And then you go check behind the quality of what they've done, and the quality is just not there. Yeah. So what are some of the unique things about South Carolina and the environment down here that contribute, to things you may find in the house that you may not find if you lived other places, up in the Midwest or up in the Northeast?
Yeah, I guess one of the big ones, and this is just kind of a normal wear and tear thing that's going to happen, but we run HVAC systems pretty hard here. Yeah. But the big one is humidity. So just about every crawl space you go into, you find some levels of fungal growth, and a lot of that is just, it's spores that are on the wood, but it's inactive. If that wood's not wet, it's really not going to create an issue, but it does sound alarming to somebody who's buying a home and they hear that there's fungal growth underneath the home. And that's the biggest one that people get worried about, and because of that humidity, there's always going to be that issue underneath in the crawl space. And a lot of times, as long as you have adequate space under there and ventilation and air moving through and a vapor barrier, you're not going to really have too many issues. There's going to be some moisture underneath. That's just par for the course. But you really don't need encapsulation. So a lot of times people will have somebody come out and they're like, oh, you have a huge moisture problem. We sell you this encapsulation setup basically for $20,000. And what they do is they take a thick plastic and they wrap it all the way up and basically completely seal underneath your house from the outside elements, put it in a dehumidifier. And it's great. I love it because I can crawl through and it's really clean and it's really dry and easy to inspect. But it's something that you pay a lot of money for that's just not really necessary most of the time.
It is the South and it is Columbia and it does get humid here. And fungal growth does not mean the 4-letter word that starts with an M, right? It is not mold. So, I think that's one thing that people commonly just get excited about when they see it. It's like fungal growth. They automatically think that it is mold, but it is not.
When working with the buyer or the seller, though, during the inspection process, what are some things that they can do to help make your job easier? Is there anything that, like, communication-wise, appointments, or what do they need to do with their home inspector to help make their job as smooth as possible? Yeah, so a lot of times it's great because a good realtor will take care of this, and you guys are fantastic about it, is notifying the listing agent, and ideally, I'm never going to tell an owner they can't be at the house during the inspection because it's still their house, it's still their property, but it makes my job a lot easier.
Just not sleep in the bedroom.
Yeah, exactly. But it makes my job an awful lot easier when they're not around because they feel the need to kind of shadow you around and you're taking a picture of something, they're saying, oh yeah, that's going to be fixed. Well, it's not at that time, so it's going to go in the report. I don't care what you're going to do with it. I don't care why it's broken. It's going to go in the report. Or they try and convince you of things that aren't necessarily, or they say aren't necessarily wrong, or why it's always worked and it's been just fine. So ideally the seller's gone, and then on the buyer front, I mean, it's great when they're there, it's great when they're not. Either way, we'll have a conversation with them afterwards and go through everything to make sure they're comfortable. They know what they're buying, and that's what they pay us for. So if they want to be there, that's fine. What's tough sometimes is a lot of times parents, uncles, cousins will come along and
becomes a family affair.
Yeah, it does. And then they know somebody that used to do HVAC work, or they know somebody who's a plumber, or they've maybe fixed a faucet in their life, so now they're a plumber, and they'll come through and follow us and just tell us all about things. Like I had one instance where I'm climbing up on the roof and pull my ladder out, and I get up there and I turn around, and the home buyer climbed up the ladder and is on the roof with me, and that creates a lot of liability for me because he used my ladder to get up there, and if he falls, that isn't a great situation for me. So it's great when they're there, but it also makes my job harder when they're looking over my shoulder and they need everything explained to them every time I take a photo, because ultimately it does distract me, and I might miss things that I would have seen otherwise because I'm talking to somebody, walking them through every little thing. So same thing, I'm never going to say they can't be there, but it does make my job easier if they're there to let me go through and have a 15-20 minute walkthrough conversation with them afterwards to say, hey, here's what's wrong, what kind of questions do you have about what you saw.
So thinking about things that you've seen, what's the strangest thing you've ever encountered under somebody's house? Like you've gotten under there and you're calling around and you just weren't expecting to see it. What's the strangest thing you've come across?
Well, there's the easy one is just animals and carcasses a lot. Sometimes you'll see some just like weird dolls and stuff underneath. And then there's the more nefarious activities sometimes in crawl spaces that are a little bit taller and actually have some room. You'll see just outlet strip after outlet strip and probably about 100, 120 outlets underneath the house. And there's not many reasons you need that much power underneath. So we'll come across that every once in a while. And then also sometimes people there's rooms that look like they've been outfitted. I don't know, I hesitate to say this a little bit, but outfitted for somebody to be in there that probably shouldn't be there. So there's some creepy and just worrisome things that we find. But you go through enough homes and kind of take a fine-tooth comb through them, and you find weird stuff that's happened or gone on there.
Somebody's realtor didn't tell them hey, somebody's gonna crawl through every square inch of your house. Maybe you need to go pick some stuff up.
And the crazy thing is, a lot of times I don't even think this. Sometimes the sellers don't even know because maybe it was there beforehand and they were never made aware. And I would say most sellers or most homeowners don't ever open up the crawl space door and go crawling through there, or even the attic sometimes if it's a more difficult attic to get to. So sometimes that's in their house and it was from before and they just don't even know.
Have you ever seen any just horrible renovations?
Every week. A lot of people in the business, because there's a lot of money in the business, and it's just they throw stuff together that trim's a big one. So a lot of times trim and frame your own doors. If it doesn't fit, you just make it fit. So it's things that really shouldn't be there, don't belong there, but they just find whatever they can and throw it up, work it. But another one, that picture I always show is there was a plumbing problem, and they had pinhole leaks in copper piping, which happens over time once it corrodes. In the fix, I don't think it was a licensed plumber. I think it was probably Uncle Billy. He took golf tees and put golf tees into the pinhole leaks and then sprayed it with Flex Seal. And it was not keeping the water in. It was still leaking. So
It's not as bad.
Yeah, probably not. But yeah, so we see things like that. I mean, all the time. It's unbelievable. And I used to, when I first got into this, I would share a photo and be like, how crazy is this? Or what do you think they were doing? Or try and kind of dig into the seller and be like, what's the purpose of this? And I've stopped asking because it never makes sense. So.
Well, I'm out of questions. Do you have any more questions? So is there anything else that we haven't asked you about that maybe you just want to throw out there to folks? Or
I mean, I think we covered it a little bit, but it's just in my job security is just the importance of getting a home inspection. I've never, brand new construction, older home, freshly renovated home, never have been in a home where we didn't find more in repairs that need to be completed than the cost of the home inspection. And I never walked out of one saying, well, they probably didn't need me. They probably would have been better off saving their money. So I know that sounds a little unbiased, but it's true. In a lot of markets, the nice thing about South Carolina here, and you can probably speak to it a little bit more, is it's very buyer friendly. So you have a due diligence period where you can walk away pretty much for anything, so it doesn't really benefit you by waiving the home inspection, whereas some markets, I know that it makes your offer stronger by saying, hey, I'm not going to get a home inspection done, and it's hard.
But you know, all that's about the change. So the state off the residential contract at the state that every other MLS uses except for us here in the Midlands has changed to a negotiated due diligence period.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the standard 10 business days that we use, but ours is fixing the change. It's going through the local Realtors Association now, and I think we're headed towards moving to a negotiated due diligence, which bothers me because it's going to put pressure on us to get you there.
Yeah.
But if you're busy,
Yeah.
and we've negotiated a 2 business day due diligence, you know,
you can't get somebody out there.
it can't be done. I mean, I've not been in a house yet where I've felt comfortable telling my client, if you're going to buy it as is, still get a home inspection, because you can walk away from the as is piece of it. So, but you know, we've had a 2-year relationship with you, Brian, and it's been fantastic, and we appreciate all you do, what you've done for our clients. You're super communicative with them whenever they have questions, because we're not the expert. We didn't go through it, you know, even though we typically come and we'll hang out while you're doing it. But you know, thank you, and we also appreciate the fact that you're a home inspector who's giving of your Saturday mornings when we do our home buyers workshop at the Greater Irmo Chamber of Commerce for the community, for all these young people out there that are learning the process of buying a home. You know, so thank you for that time. We appreciate it. I know that's time you could probably be doing another home inspection.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been great working with y'all as well. I mean, you guys make my job easy, and it's a lot of realtors, they don't like what we do because sometimes get the tag of a deal killer, because we're pointing out what's wrong with the house, but we're never making things up. If it's in there, there's a photo of it. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And I don't try and scare home buyers away, but there's a lot of times where realtors will call me afterwards and say, hey, can you take this off the report, or can you just tell them this isn't a problem? Like, they're about to walk away from the house. And obviously I'm never going to do that, but it puts me in a difficult situation, and I mean, probably not going to work with those realtors again. But I appreciate you guys. I mean, you guys do right by your clients, and you make sure that what they're buying, they know it, and you take good care of them, and you're honest in getting them across the finish line. So it's been great working with y'all as well.
Well, thank you. Like you said, there are a lot of real estate agents in the business, just like there are a lot of home inspectors, and they range in how well they do their job. So, you know, those of us, I think, that want to do a good job find each other and, you know, work well together to get people into homes that are safe. So thank you for taking your time today to join us. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me.
You're very welcome, and we'll actually, I know this won't air until well after our next home buyer workshop. We got another one coming up this Saturday, so we'll see you then.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you
Awesome.
then.
The Cola guys would like to thank Loveland Coffee for allowing us to record our episodes at their location in the heart of Irmo, South Carolina. They pride themselves with providing the best coffee, best customer service, and focusing on serving their community. If you're just looking to grab a mug to go, or stay and enjoy the ambiance, or purchase a bag of their roasted beans for home brewing, you can't beat Loveland Coffee. Thanks to Beach and his staff for all they do for their clients and the Irmo community.